Hello, everybody. My name is Maggie, and I'm from Weller Health Education at Lehigh Valley Riley Children's Hospital. Some of your children may recognize me because what my job is I travel to different schools and I just teach different health programs. So that's what Weller has been doing for the past several years. We've been traveling to so many different schools all around the area, up to the Poconos, Strasburg, and we just teach many different health topics. Topics like mental health. So I'll talk about depression, managing stress, anxiety. I'll talk about drugs. Vaping was a really huge one that I taught last year. And one of my biggest ones is definitely giving your children the talk and talking about puberty with them. That's probably one of my most popular programs that I teach. So I teach a lot of different things, but today I'm not teaching your children, I'm teaching you guys. Today I want to talk about the COVID-19 vaccine because this has been a huge topic of discussion and not only online, but in the news as well. So I want to talk about it with you guys. I'm sure you have so many questions on your mind, you're unsure of what to believe, there's so much information out there. Believe me, I understand. It's hard to go through that information and decide what's true and what's not. So that's what I want to do today. I want to try and answer any question that's been on your mind for the past couple months about this vaccine. Okay, so I want to help you guys to understand it better, how it was researched, and how it prevents the COVID-19 spread and making us really sick. All right, so let's get started.
All right, everybody, so let's get started. I want to answer as many of your questions that you have, any question that's been on your mind about the COVID-19 vaccine, how it works, and how we understand that it's safe and effective. All right, so let's get started talking about it. Now, in order to understand the vaccine, first we have to understand how COVID-19 makes us sick in the first place. Here's how it works. So the COVID-19 virus enters our body through droplets from someone coughing or sneezing. So if somebody is sick with the coronavirus and is around you, if they cough, sneeze, or even just breathe around you, they're going to be releasing all these teeny tiny little droplets that contain the virus. And then we breathe those in, and it eventually makes us sick. Now, the virus uses something called a spike protein. This protein penetrates our cells, and that's actually what causes the infection. So when the virus enters our body, it uses this spike protein to penetrate our cells, cause infection, until pretty soon our cells are making this virus over and over, kind of like a factory. And then pretty soon our bodies are taken over by this virus, and we start getting the symptoms of COVID-19, feeling really sick, feeling really rotten. So that is how COVID-19 works and how it actually makes us sick. So now that we understand that, we can start to understand vaccines and how the vaccine works. So how does the COVID-19 vaccine work? Well, here's how. So the COVID-19 vaccine contains something called RNA. This may look kind of familiar to you. It kind of sounds like DNA, right? We know that DNA is the code for life. Well, DNA is actually the code for RNA. So our body reads our DNA, which then creates RNA, which then is the code for proteins. So RNA is actually what creates the proteins in our body. And we know that our bodies are made up of proteins, and that's what makes each of us individual, makes us living beings, and makes us who we are. All right, so that's what RNA is. Now, viruses actually use RNA too. So, the COVID-19 vaccine contains this RNA, which is the code for the virus's spike protein. All right, does that make sense? So, the RNA actually codes for the virus's spike protein, and it's going to create that in our bodies. So, the RNA penetrates one of our cells. The cell reads those RNA instructions, and it says to itself, all right, you know what? I have the instructions. I'm going to create that spike protein in this cell. So, think of RNA as like a recipe, okay? So, our cell is a bakery. It gets this recipe, the RNA instructions, and then pretty soon it's going to create that end result, which is the spike protein. So once that spike protein is made, our body begins making antibodies, which fight off the virus. So antibodies are what make us healthy, which fight off the viruses in our bodies. And once you get those antibodies made, you are now immune to the virus. So it's pretty cool how this works. It simulates essentially us being sick with coronavirus, when in reality we just have this spike protein, which is then going to create those antibodies, which will then fight off the virus anytime our bodies come in contact with it. So it's pretty amazing how this whole thing works. This one little tiny protein can make those antibodies we need to fight off the virus in our lives and keep us nice and healthy. So here's just a little graph that kind of shows this process step by step. So here inside this vaccine is going to be that RNA that codes for the protein. So our bodies will receive the vaccine. The RNA is going to go into one of our cells. Inside the cell, our body is going to then make that vital protein, so that spike protein I was talking about. And then pretty soon our body is going to simulate being sick, and it's going to create those antibodies. So it's pretty cool how this whole thing works, how it just starts from a little bit of RNA, which then creates that protein, which then creates those antibodies we need to fight off the virus. So what are the benefits of having an RNA vaccine? There's actually a couple of them. It's pretty cool how this works. So RNA is actually pretty easy to make in a lab. So because it's so easy, vaccines are able to be made very quickly. We're able to make in the factories hundreds of thousands of vaccines to eventually go out to the public. RNA vaccines are actually really safe too. RNA can't cause infection, so you can't get sick from RNA. And it's broken down by our cells in the normal processes that our cells do. Also, the vaccine does not contain the live virus. I know some people get a little bit confused about a live virus, even though we use it for most of our vaccines, but just another benefit is that the RNA vaccine does not contain the live virus, like it does with the flu shot. So I've been seeing a lot of misinformation going on around online, a lot of people having a million questions about that vaccine, and one really big one is why was the vaccine able to be made so quickly? A lot of people have been really concerned about the speed in which the vaccine was able to be made. I understand that. I understand why people would be concerned, be confused on why this vaccine was able to be made so quickly in conjunction with other vaccines. Like in the past, it's taken us decades and decades to figure out a vaccine for some illnesses. But we were able to make a vaccine in a span of just a couple of months. So it's pretty amazing how quickly this vaccine was able to be made. But unfortunately, a lot of people have had questions and are confused on why it was so quick. So let me go through two big reasons why the vaccine was able to be made so quickly. One really big reason, every major scientist in the world stopped what they were working on to focus on researching COVID-19 and a potential vaccine. So in any given point in time, there has been some group of scientists researching a vaccine, disease, really anything you can think of, there is probably one scientist working on it. But because of that, there's usually limited funding and a limited number of people to research. So it takes a really long time. Right now, everybody stopped what they were doing and threw themselves into researching a vaccine. So every major pharmaceutical company, government agency, university, everybody is working on this because it's killed so many people and there's an urgency to make a vaccine. So that's a big reason why. Think of it like this. If you have one person building a car by themselves, it's going to take them a really long time to do it. Versus when you have an entire factory, an entire assembly line of people making a car, they're going to be able to build that car in a really short amount of time. So think of it like that. It's because we have so many people and the brightest and best minds in the world researching this. And also, guys, it's 2020. It's amazing where technology is at now. So the ability of human beings to make vaccines and to research diseases is unparalleled compared to past decades. I know I was talking with my grandparents about the polio vaccine. It took them a really long time to make the polio vaccine, but also look at the time period. That was back in the 50s. It took them a really long time just because the technology was not there yet. Right now, the technology is there where we were able to make a vaccine for COVID in such a short amount of time. Which brings me to my next point. The technology was already there. So scientists were already researching RNA vaccines for other illnesses. So COVID-19 was actually a perfect fit because we only needed to get an RNA vaccine for that tiny little spike protein. So that's why it was different for this particular illness. Every disease works differently. No two viruses are the exact same. So because of that, we were able to find and use this past research with RNA vaccines and apply it to COVID-19. So that's kind of how the science and the research worked for making this vaccine and why it was able to be made so quickly. I hope that made sense, and I hope that kind of helps ease your fears about why it was so quick. How was the vaccine tested? The vaccine went through the same rigorous testing that any other medication or vaccine needs to go through. So there were no corners cut, there was nothing skipped. Everything, the vaccine went through the exact same trials that any other vaccine has to go through in the past. All right. So I actually have personal experience with this. I actually got to be a part of the Pfizer trial. I was a participant. So I got to be in the Pfizer trial and I asked them plenty of questions. Don't worry. And I asked them, I said, was there anything that was rushed? And they said the only thing that was rushed was just the paperwork. When you're doing science and when you're doing research, there is so much paperwork and so many hoops you have to jump through. Basically, Pfizer just kind of took care of all that extra paperwork, so they didn't have to worry about doing it, but they still went through the exact same trials that any other vaccine had to go through. And it was tested on thousands of people. So both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines were tested on over 70,000 people in 3 separate trials, myself included. I got to be a part of that trial, and I potentially received the vaccine. So it's tested on so many people. They don't just invent the vaccine and then give it out to people the next day. It went through months of testing before it was even allowed to be in the public, okay? So when they test vaccines and just medications in general, it goes through 3 phases of testing. So they do the first phase, and then they do the second, and then they finally do the third. And in the final phase, they use a double-blind study. So for those of you who don't know what a double-blind study is, it's essentially when they do this third phase of testing, they give half of the participants the vaccine, and they give the other half a placebo. So it's usually just saline. It's not going to do anything to hurt your body. And this is the gold standard of research. Every medication that you take and every vaccine that you have been given has been used in a double-blind study because it is the best way to research how well a vaccine actually works. So I promise you guys, it has gone through very, very rigorous testing. The best minds in the world analyzed this data and they found it to be incredibly safe, and it was tested on enough people as well, okay? Now, a big question a lot of people have asked me, being in this study and in the trial, people have asked me, is it safe? And the answer to that question is yes. This was tested on so many thousands and thousands of people, and nobody has had any life-threatening injuries to it. The majority of people have had mild reactions, the same ones that you actually get when you get the flu shot. You might have swelling around the arm where the vaccine was given. You might be a little feverish for a couple of hours, feel a little tired, just not so great. But you get most of these same reactions when you get really any other vaccine. So when you're a kid and you got the MMR vaccine, the measles one, your flu shot that you get annually, really any other vaccine, you're going to have these exact same symptoms. There are some people who have had some serious reactions, but only a few. 6 people out of hundreds of thousands have had allergic reactions. So allergic reactions can be incredibly dangerous. They can be life-threatening. So when you receive the vaccine, you actually stay in the doctor's office for a couple of minutes just in case you have a reaction and they can give you medical attention. But don't forget, you have that same risk of having an allergic reaction when you take any new medication or even eat a new food. Think about when your children have peanut butter for the first time. You are risking them having maybe a potential peanut allergy. So allergies exist for anything that we take in life. For me, I'm actually allergic to sulfa medications, and that was something I didn't know until I took the medication for the first time. So unfortunately, allergies do exist, but we can't really predict who is going to have an allergy and who doesn't. That's just kind of a very small risk that people have to take in order to protect themselves from a life-threatening virus. And they are recommending, if you've had potential allergic reactions to certain ingredients in the vaccine, then they are recommending that you not get it. So you can find out the ingredients of the vaccine online. You can research it right now if you wanted to. Find it out, check and see if you have an allergic reaction to any of those in the past, and if not, then talk to your healthcare provider before getting it. Okay? So until everyone receives this vaccine, which may be another couple of months from now, but hopefully soon, please, please, please continue to practice social distancing. Maintain a 6-foot distance from anybody when you're out in public, and really avoid people as much as you can from your immediate household. Always wear a mask around others, especially when you're going out in public. I don't want to have to keep arguing with people about wearing a mask, but it does make a difference. We see the research and the data from places that require masks and places that don't. Wash your hands regularly with soap and warm water. And finally, try to avoid participating in high-risk activities. So avoid large crowds if you can, only go out for the essentials, and if you are able to work from home, then definitely I recommend it. It's pretty amazing. So definitely keep practicing all of these until we can finally get everybody vaccinated and we can kind of get back to some semblance of normal. Believe me, guys, I am desperate to get back to normal very soon, so hopefully pretty soon everybody can get the vaccine. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. I hope I didn't take too much of your time out of your day. I hope you guys actually understood this. I hope I explained it in a way that was easy to understand. Please comment below if you have any questions. Thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to watch this, and definitely pass this on to other people. We want to make sure we're spreading good, correct information and not some false information, okay? So thank you guys so much for watching. Please stay safe out there. I promise we'll get vaccinated soon. Have a great rest of your day. Be safe. See you in the next video. Bye!